Hi everybody, welcome back to the Eastfield Gunroom YouTube channel, and as you can see we are once again outside in what is left of the glorious British summertime. Now today's review is something wildly different from what we've already done. This is another requested review. So someone got in touch, they said, can we see this particular gun? I thought, yeah, not a problem, happy to do that. It's a gun I've always had a fondness for. Let's go out and find one. But I thought, let's not find a standard one, let's go and find something a bit off the wall. So today we're going to have a look at a Renato Gamba, but we're going to look at a limited edition version, and this is the Renato Gamba Carrera. To give you a little bit of history, Gamba is an Italian manufacturer, been around since I believe 1700s-ish in terms of the family in the area of Brescia, which is where you've got other giants like Beretta, Caesarguini, etc., Bosis, Salvinelli, and they really started to come into their own, in my opinion, in sort of the, I don't know when they started positioning over under shotguns, because if you look at the internet, it's a little bit sketchy. You've got 2 or 3 different Gamba families. This particular manufacturer is Renato Gamba. Now, just to bring you right up to date, it's currently run by maybe the 3rd or 4th generation of Gamba, which is Enrico. Now, I can remember these guns being popular in the UK in the sort of late 1990s, early 2000s, and if someone said to me, what would you say is the most understated gun out there in terms of its build quality, its handling, performance, etc., for what is a really modest price, I would have to pick Gamba, certainly in my top 3. Now this gun here is a 2003 model, and like I said, from memory, here in the UK, these guns were popular late 90s up into the early 2000s. I haven't seen one that's any older than about 1994 or 95. I believe Kevin Gill, who was a GB trap shooter, had a lot to do with the introduction of Renato Gamba into the UK. And if you look back historically, superstars such as Richard Fold shot one. I'm not entirely sure George Digweed didn't shoot one. So during their time, they've had some real top draw athletes, should we say, using them. And I'm going to show you why, because they are an absolutely fantastic gun. If you didn't know what a Gamba was, you would probably look at this gun and say, that looks like a Perazzi, because in essence, it is very similar to a Perazzi. If I take the fore end off and take the barrels off, I'll show you. So low profile boss style action, and right down to the wedges here and the recoil bits on the edge of the lumps, that essentially looks like a Perazzi barrel. The only noticeable difference I can see is when you look at the bottom, you've got these knob ends that you wouldn't get on a Perazzi. So this gun, 2003, and like I said, the Gambas are still available today, still manufactured today, sadly not available in the UK. There has been 2 or 3 importers that I can remember, but there's no longer one available. But you can still buy a new Gamba. I believe they're about the same size, same sort of price as a Perazzi. So what you've got to take into consideration there, these are a real top-end competition gun. From my experience, I've only really seen competition guns come from Renato Gamba. I do believe that there'll be game versions available, but I've certainly only ever really seen sort of trap, sporters, maybe even a skeet gun here in the UK. So if we start off with like I said, the low profile action, almost identical to a Perazzi in the way that it works. Barrels on this particular gun are 32 inch. So what you've got here is you've got 32 inch. Now, one of the very interesting things with Gamba, with some various Italian guns, I think Perazzi certainly used to do it back in the day, is that the majority of the action designs, they are always non-selective triggers. And I think that's because the majority of them were always designed for kind of trap disciplines, certainly Olympic trap, double trap, etc., whereby you don't really need a selective trigger. I'll come on to that in a second. So we'll start off with the barrels. This one's 32 inch, 1530 barrels. Now that's light. If you had a 32 inch gun, the likes of a Krieghoff, a DT11, another Perazzi, you'll understand that's quite a light barrel gun. Handfire cut tapered rib, which I think is about 8 to 11. Again, not dissimilar to a Perazzi. In my opinion, the most popular Perazzi rib configuration has always been 7 by 11. Again, it's a tapered rib. Ventilated barrels, ventilated rib. And whereas this gun would originally been manufactured with fixed chokes, which again is another Perazzi trait. The majority of them are fixed choke when they come out of the factory. My experience has always been that factory multi-choke Perazzis are a bit too heavy and a bit too lumpy. People don't tend to like them, which is why if you come across a Gamba, a Perazzi, I would probably include Keyman in that as well, and it's got multi-chokes. 9 times out of 10, it's either been T multi-choked or Briley multi-choked. This particular gun has been Briley multi-choked. So that's another thin wall choke system, which is American, rather than Tigers, of course, is a company here in the UK. And what it does is it gives you the performance and the versatility of a multi-choke gun without affecting the balance of a fixed choke gun. I hope I covered that properly. Bore-wise, these are 18.4mm, which is 729. So what you would have there is arguably better with fibre wad cartridges, although when this gun was manufactured, which I think is 2003, certainly here in the UK to my knowledge, the majority of stuff was plastic. It's only really the last sort of 10, 12 years where it's become a lot more prevalent here, whereby most grounds have moved over to fibre wad for environmental reasons. Chrome line barrels, not chrome line chambers, again, very similar. You know, I keep referring back to a Perazzi, but it is a very, very, very similar gun. Now, I do like Perazzis. It's not a gun I've actually ever owned. I've shot quite a few. They're all very different. I'm sure we'll look at Perazzi later on in the channel. But what you got to remember with Perazzi is they have that many different options in terms of barrel weights, barrel length, rib types, and that's just the barrel. That's before you get onto the type of actions and engravings, etc. Now, this particular Gamba was known as the Daytona. I can't quite find out why it was called a Daytona, whether it's got some Olympic reference, I couldn't be sure. Now, typically they were available in either a black action or a silver action, and that was it. Again, I think I might have touched this on a previous video, I might not have done, but what you tend to find with high-end competition guns in their basic form is that they will always have a plain action, be it silver, black, because ultimately they aren't designed to go out and shoot pheasants or partridge or whatever. They're designed to go out and break clays every single day of the week. And if you look at the likes of the DT10, the DT11, Perazzis, Keymans, the majority of them all have a plain action because that is not where the importance lies in terms of that as a competition shotgun. So what you've got here, and this is why I wanted to get hold of this particular gun, because it's not a standard Daytona. This is the Carrera, so this has got upgraded wood, different engraving, a bit more going on with the gold bits around the barrels, etc. It's just a slightly nicer version of a Daytona. So deeply blued action, you've got the gold bits around the top of the barrels, these borders, and then you've got a partridge on the one side and a woodcock on the other side, picked out in gold. Quite interesting from my point of view, because this gun weighs 8 pounds 13 ounces. It's not a game gun. It's not, you know, by any stretch of the imagination. Not quite sure why they would choose to put those game birds on. But take into the consideration the fact that they don't manufacture that many guns. This was probably done as a limited run, and it's just something they wanted to try, and that is it. In fact, the person I had this gun, where I acquired this shotgun from, had another one which was bought at a similar time, and it was actually 2 guns apart. I've done a little bit of research. I've spoken to people who used to import these guns into the UK, one of which was Trevor Stanton from Country Pursuits, and he told me quite a lot about this gun in terms of data manufacture, service history, etc. And you know, so it is a gun that's got a bit of provenance with it as well. Really, really, really nifty bit of kit is a detachable trigger. Again, if you look at competition guns like Perazzi, Keyman, Beretta DT10, Beretta DT11, going back even further, Beretta ASE, they will have detachable trigger groups. Now, the thing with the detachable trigger group, to show you what I mean. Okay, so the entire trigger mechanism comes out. Now, there's 3 primary uses for a detachable trigger. First of all is maintenance, okay? So you're shooting all over the world in big competitions, lots of cartridges, lots of training. Should you need to lubricate, etc., your trigger, you haven't got to take the stock off, just give it, you know, take your trigger out, give it a blast, etc. But more so, anything that can go wrong, which you would hope wouldn't go wrong, is encased in that trigger mechanism. So you don't have to have a spare gun. What you essentially do is you have a spare trigger mechanism. So you know, hopefully there'll be no issue. If there was an issue and you're on the line shooting trap and there was a problem with the shotgun. And the third one, which again goes back to the competition level shooting all over the world, taking your guns to airports, hotel, etc., is safety. What you can do is you can take that out and you can put it in your drawer with your socks, okay, when you go to dinner, and what you've essentially done is you've made the shotgun secure. Of course, the thing with detachable trigger guns is it's a very clever piece of kit, but obviously it's quite expensive to produce. If you look at this particular one, so you've got some nice engine turning here on the Gamba, okay? And I talked earlier about selective triggers and non-selective actions. Now, what's interesting with this particular Gamba is it's got a selective trigger, which is a button on the trigger. So you can push the button across to decide whether you want to fire the top or the bottom barrel first. Really, really neat, really, really nicely engineered. One point with this particular gun is I believe that when it was supplied new, it had a black trigger group. It's now silver. And that again is, if you get people who own multiple guns of the same kind and they, for some reason, one trigger feels a little bit crisper than another, then they will just sort of kind of change them around. And the reason I know that is because I think the colour's different, and also the number doesn't quite match the serial number which is stamped on the inside of the trigger. Dead easy to remove, which what I'll do is I'll put it back in. I'll show you how to remove it first. Okay, so you've got a little bar here, not a Mars bar, but it's, you know, it's similar. So push that across and it just pulls out. Really, really neat. Some other guns, again, I refer to Perazzi, some of them you've got to push the selector for, sorry, the safety catch forward in order to release it. I personally think this is a much neater system because it's a lot easier and a lot more user friendly. So put that in there. Okay, simples. So that's the action. We've talked about the hand file cut rib. Now, fans of these guns will compare the quality of them 9 times out of 10 to Perazzi, because again, it's kind of like it's a copy of a Perazzi. And some people have said to me, I actually think the Gamba barrels are better made than Perazzi. And I think it's a real shame that, particularly here in the UK, these guns are massively understated. Not something you see very often, but if you get hold of one, the feel, the engineering, the wood to metal fit, it's just a quality thing. Now, moving on to the woodwork. Typical Italian. It's big, it's chunky, it's got a nice big pistol grip, feels lovely. Now this gun weighs, as I said before, £8, 13 ounces, but it doesn't feel it because the balance is exceptional. It's light in the barrel. So if you're the kind of shooter that likes a big heavy stock to get the barrels moving, then this is absolutely the kind of gun you should look at. Obviously these are all different, and you know, one gun will vary to another, etc. But if you look at this particular gun, then the balance is, that's just below, just the back of the hinge pin. Really good. And like I said, when you pick it up, it doesn't feel anywhere near as heavy as it is. And that is what you're paying for when you look at high-end competition shotguns. It's all about the feel, it's all about the balance, and what that does, that adds to the performance, adds to the usability of it. Palm swell, love it. Typical Italian. Nice and fat in the comb. So what that gives you is very little felt recoil. Now, despite this having nominal bore barrels, I've shot it, it's so smooth to shoot. It's absolutely lovely. I can't stand recoil. I don't handle recoil very well. I don't like it, which is why I shoot a gun that weighs nearly £9. This is, for what it is absolutely lovely. There is virtually no recoil whatsoever. Really good trigger pulls, as you would expect. I think they're about 3 1/4, 3.5 pounds, something like that. So it feels really good. I've not got particularly big hands, but my hand fits in the grip really nice. Just the right amount of recess here, again for a normal person size hand. Quite high in the comb, sort of 35, 50. And that makes it very user friendly, because what you've got there is you've got a gun you can use for sport, you need to fit ask. And because there's not a lot of drop on it, you can use it for trap. Now, also, in terms of gun fit, and this is something we'll discuss later on in the channel, is the more of a parallel comb you've got, the less margin for error there is in terms of mount. Because if your head is here, or your head is here, and the gun's almost parallel, you're going to get the same kind of sight picture. Now, I really like what's called honey and black. So this is honey and black wood. You've got this nice honey colour with the black streaks running through it. nice and strong in the head because it's very, very straight, and that's what you want from a competition gun because it gives you longevity and it also reduces further, and this is a very smooth shooting gun, as I've already said, reduces the recoil. Now this, interestingly, has got a Beretta recoil pad. Not sure what the story behind that is. I think normally it would have had a very thin sort of kind of sporting pad. Again, this micro recoil pad's been fitted nicely, it shoots well, no problem at all. Fore end, really slim, to be fair, nicely slim. A little bit of a schnabel on the front of it. I'm not a huge fan of a schnabel, but I don't find that offensive. I think it looks really good and it suits the lines of the gun. Nicely finely checkered, which would be hand checkered. Like I said, at Gamba, they don't manufacture that many shotguns. I don't know how many it is, but I would imagine it's certainly sub 2,000 a year, probably even potentially between 1,000 and 1,500. It won't be any more than that. As you would expect, with this, you get a case. Now, one thing I want to say is, even though these guns, late 90s, early 2000s were a popular choice with shooters across the board, and they are kind of an unsung hero today, there are still places all over the world that still regard these very, very highly, some more than, dare I say it, Perazzi. I can remember people buying these from Scandinavia, sort of Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, big following over there, and also Italy a little bit, in all fairness. The States, they're quite popular in the States, and like I said, if you look about, you'll find people that have owned these guns, own Renato Gambas, and very rarely you'll find someone who's got a bad word to say about them, because they are very, very good guns. And to put things into perspective, and I don't talk about prices ever, you can buy one of these now for a lot less than you would pay for a mid-range competition gun, new, something like a Browning Ultra XS, Beretta 694, in some cases almost half of what you'd pay for one of those new. So you can probably work it out from there. As you would expect, we've got a nice case. I think the inside of this case looks a little bit like something, like a Ford Sierra interior. It's really nice little checkered pattern, but does the job. It's airline approved. We talk about people taking guns all over the world. It's got the 3 locks on it, and we've got some chokes. These are the Briley thin wall chokes, not quite as light as a T choke, but still gives you which you could argue with lightweight barrels on this particular gun is a much better option. And I believe that a lot of these were kind of bought into the UK and then kind of batch multi-choked by Briley through Chris Potter, I believe, in the UK. So that's been the Renato Gamba Carrera. It's a gun you probably won't see again. It's a gun I probably won't see again. Really, really nice bit of kit. Something that was a requested review. More than happy to do it because these guns are hugely, hugely underrated. Don't forget to keep liking and subscribing the channel. Don't forget to keep sending those requests in because that's what we want. We want to be showing you stuff that you want to see. I look forward to seeing you next time. From me, Matthew Morgan, Eastfield Gunroom in the glorious British countryside. See you soon.